When I was a teenager, I did what teenagers sometimes do, though I know none of you ever did this. But I came home late after my curfew. Yeah, I know. Now, my father was a light sleeper, so I knew when I came in, he was going to be up, and I was going to get the hours and hours of lectures that I knew was coming. But when I got there, and I walked in, he didn't say a word, except to say, "Get in the car." So I got in the car, and we drove in the dark night. Of course, I'm freaking out. He's going to throw me off a bridge. I don't know what's going to happen. But we keep driving. We go up the side of a mountain. And we get to a parking spot. And we get out. And I'm still freaking out. He's going to throw me off the mountain now. I don't know what's going to happen. So, he doesn't say a word. And we start walking up a trail. Now, I don't know if you've ever walked or hiked a trail in the pitch dark. It's very challenging. So I'm freaking out and trying to figure out where I'm going. We get to the top, sit down. Still, he doesn't say a word. And then the sun comes up over the horizon in a blaze of orange, then red, then yellow, and then it paints the landscape. And I see rivers and trees and mountains and lakes and streams and houses and on, and I was just awestruck. The mountain taught me something that day. Part of the inspiration for this sermon came from a book entitled Spiritual Literacy by Frederick and Mary Ann Broussat. The idea of the book is that parts of nature can be read and interpreted as you would any sacred text. In other words, the entire world can be our Bible. As Unitarian Universalists, we believe that a free and responsible search for truth and meaning, which is our fourth principle, can be found through different means, including, as the first source in our list of sources reads, direct experience of that transcending mystery and wonder affirmed in all cultures. So today, I would like to read a chapter from the Gospel of Nature about mountains. What do mountains represent? For human beings, mountains have been sacred places. For some, they are the axis mundi, or the center of the world, like the mythical Mount Meru, which is sacred to Hindus, Jains, and Buddhists, or the famous Kunlun Mountains of China, or Uluru in Australia. Mountains are the homes of the gods. In ancient Greece and Rome, each god and goddess lived on their own sacred mountain. In Tibet, Mount Kailash is home to the Hindu god Shiva, but is also a hallowed peak to Buddhists, Jains, and the indigenous Bon religion. The famous Mount Fuji in Japan is named after the Buddhist goddess Fuchi, but is also the residence of the Shinto goddess Sengen-sama. Mount Macy in the Adirondacks is one of the abodes of the Great Spirit of the Iroquois. Mountains are where the gods and goddesses descend from above and deliver important messages to the people. Moses received the Ten Commandments at Mount Sinai, and at Mount Nur, Muhammad received his first revelation from Allah. Jesus' most famous teaching was his Sermon on the Mount, spoken in a place now called the Mount of the Beatitudes. And there are many more examples. These are things humans have seen in mountains for thousands of years. But I believe there are important messages that we can get from mountains today. For one thing, mountains appear to be permanent, unmoving, unchanging. But the reality of that vision is different. All mountains are the result of great violence and are constantly being transformed. In human terms, we might say they are forged from trauma, but show great resilience. Mountains are formed in one of three ways. They can be the result of a volcano that spews hot magma from the depth of the earth out onto the land. Very hot lava rises up and out from the ground and then cools until a mountain and new land is created. This is how we got the volcanoes and islands of Hawaii. The second way that mountains develop is through the subduction of tectonic plates. The surface of our planet is divided into separate tectonic plates that float on the same hot magma that supplies those volcanoes. Those plates bump into each other, and that's how we get earthquakes. But when one plate slips under another, the rising plate can force itself over the other plate and become a range of mountains like the Rocky Mountains. A third way for mountains to appear is when one landmass forcefully slams itself into another landmass. The highest mountains in the world, the Himalayas, were forced up when the subcontinent of India, which was once part of what we call South America, traveled across the ocean and rammed into the southern coast of Asia, forcing the land to rise up to the sky. All three of these methods caused massive disruptions to the earth. But after all the turmoil, what remained were strong, tall, and proud mountains. But those mountains are not as permanent as they appear. Like everything else, they evolve. It's just that they take millions of years to change. The land they occupy is constantly moving, and the forces of wind, rain, ice, and snow are always reshaping them. Perhaps the spiritual message here is that trauma or difficult challenges can change us, can shape us into something even stronger than before, but not to be so firm that you cannot face the winds of change that come your way. Mountains can also signify the presence of difficult obstacles on the path. Mountains are unaccommodating to the weary traveler. They are easier to go around than to go over. There's a story about a farmer in a remote Asian village whose wife became very ill. He could not get to the village doctor because the doctor lived on the other side of a mountain. The farmer's wife died, but he spent the next 25 years of his life with a pick and a shovel cutting away that mountain so that others could get to the doctor in the future. Mountains can indeed be formidable obstacles. Consider for a moment the tallest mountain in the world, Mount Everest. It sits on the border between Nepal and Tibet in the Himalayas. One simply cannot just pack a quick lunch, put on your hiking shoes, and take a little walk over it. In fact, you can't even go over it in one setting. What you have to, there's a base camp, and then there's several camps that go up the side. And what you have to do is start at the base camp, go up to the next camp, but then you have to come back down because your body has to acclimate to all that oxygen and pressure. So you go up, and then you go up the next one, you come down, you go. And what happens is you might get through all the way to that top camp, and then the weather comes in, and your entire trip is canceled. So it really requires quite a bit of patience. The greater the mountain, the more patience is required to overcome it. Sometimes we may have to weigh the inspiring perspective a view from the top can give us with the amount of effort and sacrifice we will have to make to get there. Sometimes mountains represent adventure, the thrill of the climb, scenes of remarkable beauty all along its valleys and slopes, and a chance to bask in the peace and beauty of all the plants and animals nestled in its bounty. Mountains can be the goal of a sacred pilgrimage or the end of a long journey. Perhaps another lesson of mountains is to enjoy the vision of its majesty and appreciate the chance to be touched and inspired by its splendor. That was one of the lessons I learned that morning, sitting on the top of a mountain at dawn with my father. We sat at the throne of the gods and watched the sun splash colors across the landscape with its golden light. I learned humility as I sat there. I saw that I was but a tiny human in the vast grandeur of nature. At first, the mountain to me was an obstacle, something to be feared. Then it became a teacher whose message needed no words. The experience shook me. It destroyed my landscape. But I rose from it and became transformed. It was a sacred gift given to me, and I have carried it with me all these years. I invite you to join me in considering what mountains might teach us. For example, what things have formed you and shaped you into what you are today? Can you stand proud and firm even in the winds and the earth are constantly changing? Mountains need no reason, require no approval, or need not fill out any paperwork to be the magnificent towers of dignity that they already are. And the same is true for you. As you look out on the landscape of your life, what obstacles do you see? Which ones need to be overcome? Which ones can you go around? Which ones are calling out to you to be patient and steadfast as you walk along your trail? Which ones do you need to simply stop and enjoy? These are some of the questions we can ask as we read the Book of Mountain in the Bible of Nature. May it inspire you, teach you, and fill you with wonder. In the name of that which you hold in your heart to be most sacred, may it be so.